Thank you for the introduction. Everybody can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't see you all because I have it in the presentation mode, but later when the QA time, you will be able to see me. And I really miss you. And like Joseph said, I'm not stranger to many of you, and I have built up a friendship with you. I see many of you in person, and we have exchanged information through the emails, everything. Today, I'm going to focus on a few things. First is our new product, brand new product of 2020, 2021. And also I'm going to review a couple of, one is the product, the other is the method for one is Myco 6-in-1 plus is a product, Myco 5-in-1 plus. It's a method testing 6 mycotoxins with a strip test. Just an overview of all the immunoaffinity column we have. So far we have 22 different immunoaffinity columns for mycotoxins, and from last time I visited you, after that I visited you, we developed this product not for immunoaffinity column, but for BPA. Probably many of you have heard about BPA in the plastics. It's toxic to children, to adults, causes immune deficiency, causes infertility issues. So this is our another product not related to mycotoxin, but also immunoaffinity column. Since we have so many AflaTest aflatoxin columns, why a new column? Why AflaTest WB SR plus? What's the SR stand for? Here's the SR stand for solvent resistance. We all know immunoaffinity column is really good with binding specific toxins, specific chemicals, but at the same time cannot tolerate a high organic solvent. This column can tolerate 30% acetonitrile and 40% methanol. And also, advantage of using these columns, you can use one method for many different matrices, like grains, spices, herbs, coffees, cocoa. Herbs, coffees, cocoas prefer higher organic solvent, but majority of the immunoaffinity column on the market cannot tolerate a high organic solvent. Another good thing about the SR plus column is the wide testing range. I will talk about more. The LOD as low as 0.05 nanogram to as high as 1,000 nanogram. Powerful selectivity. It can bind to aflatoxin B1, B2, G1, G2, M1, M2, and sterigmatocystin. In the future, I'm going to just short for STC. And also can give a high recovery. For solvent resistance, we can look at this. Like I said, 30% acetonitrile, 40% methanol. But what is recovery? The average recovery in the low concentration can have a 2 nanogram. And the high concentration, we can go up to 500 nanogram total aflatoxin. We still get average of 96.7% recovery. Here you can see the individual aflatoxin recovery. Before our other columns, G2 always, we call it weak link. G2 has a low binding capacities. It's a weak link to most immunoaffinity column. So G2 tends to have a low recovery. But you can see here, even as high as a 500 nanogram in 40% methanol concentration, G2 still can get 89.8, almost like 90% recovery. In 2 nanogram, 91. Even in 30% acetonitrile, G2 can get 92, 87.67. So this is not just the regular, antibody. It's very specific, very highly superior antibody. So we said this is good, but let's compare to with the other column, with our competitors' column. So we selected 2 after VICAM. VICAM is number 1, the number 2 and the number 3 in this market player. So we select their columns and then to compare. Remember, I just showed you at 500 nanogram total aflatoxin, we can go 40% methanol and 30% acetonitrile. VICAM column still can give 96, average 96% recovery. So we tried that. Competitor column failed miserably. So we said, let's lower it. Lower to 20% acetonitrile, only 100 nanogram aflatoxin. See what can they do. You can say competitor number 1, competitor number 2. They fail. They cannot compete with this AflaTest WB SR column. In just 20% acetonitrile. So we talk about this is the best column in the market. How good? 1,000 nanogram B1, we can load on AflaTest WB SR column. In 20% acetonitrile, we get 80%, 25. We just push limit, see how high we can go. So we set down, say 20% acetonitrile, even 1,000 nanogram of aflatoxin, they still can get 80% recovery. In 40% methanol, 1,000 nanogram aflatoxin can still get 81% recovery. This is how good this column is. You probably have never seen any column, aflatoxin column, compound 1,000 nanogram on the market. Let's talk about the LOD. So this column is really good with higher aflatoxin concentration. What about low? How low can they go? So we use a spectral corn sample. We found the LOD for G2 is 0.008 nanogram. For B2, 0.007 nanogram. So LOD also very, very low. And this is only used UPLC, not even used LCMS. Linearity. So we from 2 nanogram all the way to 500 nanogram. Look at the linearity. R2 equal to 0.999. If you have any question right now, you can type in the chat, and if I can answer them during Q&A session. For natural contaminated corn, so we got to come back, check natural contaminated corn. So we used a reference sample. It's a 301 ppb. And we found out we used a traditional methanol extraction and then acetonitrile extraction. Same percentage. Acetonitrile extraction just gives better recovery. And we said this column is so good, so we gave this column to Chinese customer, potential customer. We said, try this. They said, oh, this column is really that good. We want to do, something for us. We want to help us solve a problem. In Chinese pharmacopedia, they have this method, use 70% methanol extraction for most Chinese herbal medicine. It works, except this medicine. This called 何首乌 in Chinese. It's very, very, they call it the most difficult Chinese herbs because with method that works for majority of Chinese herbs, for this herb, only get a 30% recovery. And then we said, okay, go ahead. We tried it. We used it for 90% acetonitrile. Immediately, we get 98.5% recovery average. So you can see acetonitrile just solves the problem. But acetonitrile extraction cannot be used for most immunoaffinity column. If you use that high acetonitrile extraction, you have to dilute down so much. And the recovery also at the same time drops. Because certain things, I think in those kind of medication, herb substance, you need to keep the organic solvent high to be able to keep the extract the aflatoxin. So for the one method, so this good thing about this method, we use this one method for 90% acetonitrile extraction. After we did that, and customer keeps saying, okay, can you try this? Can you try that? So we try different samples. It works. So we call it one method for all samples. You can use this method for simple samples, but this method is really good with difficult samples. Many of you have probably done with, spices, but majority of people haven't tested aflatoxin in cocoa and chocolate, coffee, because cocoa and coffee start to become, regulated through EU now. In general, before there's a regulation, but cocoa and coffee has not been monitored for aflatoxin. Majority of those two monitored for ochratoxin. So use just 10-gram sample, 90% acetonitrile extraction, blended the filter, diluted, just typical immunoaffinity column procedure. You will get very, very good recovery. But pay attention to here. We don't use methanol elution anymore. This column has, we said it tolerates acetonitrile and the methanol so good, the toxin bound to the column won't come out if you just use 100% methanol elution. For the elution, you have to use the acetonitrile and the methanol combination mixture to be able to elute all the toxin off the column. So remember that. So here's some data to show you red chili pepper, black pepper, cocoa, roasted coffee, not just regular roasted coffee, it's dark roasted coffee. So use the method I just showed you, the one method, you can do all this. You can see the data, how good the data is. There's more commodity. For example, we did additional data for this procedure. We did nutmeg, dog food. Almost any sample you can think about it will work. For the LC, HPLC condition, you can, after you clean up, you can use HPLC. Here's the red line. I want you see how clean. This is the red line is unspiked black pepper. The green line is a spiked black pepper with only 4 ppb. You can see how clean, how flat the sample. The background almost gone. For aflatoxin and sterigmatocystin, STC, we said this column will bound all 6 aflatoxin plus STC. And people say, since it's bound to M1, M2, can you do infant formula? We said, okay, we'll give it a try. So we just use 2-gram infant formula dissolved in the water, mixed with 6 ml acetonitrile, basic 60% acetonitrile extraction, and dilute with PBS. Pass sample through the column, wash it, elute it, inject on the UPLC. Here you can see the UPLC. Nice clean, just absolutely nice clean. Background, baseline, flat. And this is if you use UPLC, you don't have to use the photochemical reactor theory has aflatoxin. And the spec level for this one, we just spec the 0.5, 0.5, and then 2 ppb total aflatoxin. Those aflatoxins 2 ppb for total. And for STC, STC is not fluorescent, so you have to use DAD detector. This is 20 ppb STC spec the infant formula, but when we did this, people said, how low can you go for STC? So we did the STC with the corn because the corn is going to be more tested for STC, corn or green or whatever. So we use that to get the STC for the LOD. It's if you don't dry the sample, you just kind of like the aflatoxin. If you do, you dilute the toxin and dilute it with water. Then you inject and detect. It's only 2.3, but if you want a lower limited detection, you can dry down. Because this is not fluorescent detector, so it's not as sensitive as LCMS. But for if you clean up, if you use this, put it on LCMS, the LOD is going to be much lower. This is just for the UPLC. So LOD, LQ is not as low as LCMS. There's some LCMS people generate data on the LCMS, MS. So the STC much lower, but this is just the UPLC. For infant formula recovery, you can see the average recovery, the mean recovery. It's almost everything above 90, and there's one data point less than 95% recovery. Everything else above 95% recovery. So can this column, because I talked about the elution, you need this column. It's the bonding. It's so hard, so tight to aflatoxin. You have to use acetonitrile methanol elution to get better recovery. So some people said, I have to follow AOAC because the AOAC said methanol elution. The EU method said methanol elution. If you must follow exactly the AOAC method, EU method, I would suggest you continue to use our AflaTest column, AflaTest WB, AflaTest WB SR columns. You don't have to use this one. But if you want good recovery, about 90% recovery with difficult matrices, you have to use, different extraction, different elution. So we tried it. We said, okay, some people said, I have to use the AVC method, but I'm willing to modify the elution, not use just methanol. So we tried it. Use 70% methanol extraction and, follow exactly AVC procedure, but we use acetonitrile methanol elution. You can see the recovery. It's still very, very good. Because most of you know the AVC procedure, the G2 recovery only asks for about 60% because most commercial columns cannot reach high G2 recovery. But with this elution, you can reach it. But if you use this column, like I said earlier, if you just use the methanol elution, you're still going to have many aflatoxins left on the column, will not come down. Because this column bonding aflatoxin so tight, you have to use some acetonitrile to strip the aflatoxin off the column. Just a conclusion on this AflaTest WB SR column. So if a lab need to have a good recovery, greater than 90% for all aflatoxins, especially G2, and all aflatoxins for difficult matrices, this column is for you. if you need to use acetonitrile extraction, like the example I gave you, that specific Chinese herbs, you have to use acetonitrile extraction. This is the column for you. If you want to use one method in your lab, like you remember our AflaTest menu, there's so many different methods. The reason there's so many methods is because when you deal with spices, deal with difficult sample, you have to use different procedure. And if you do corn, the simple things, you just use a simple procedure. But this one, you can use one method for all the samples. So you don't have to have SOP for this, SOP for that. You know, different matrices, you have different procedures, especially for commercial labs. They get all kinds of sample come into their lab. For those people, if you just want one method for any sample come to your lab, this is a column for you. Also for the people need to test STC, this is a column for you. So people say you have so many AflaTest columns. What's the difference? So here I just list the difference between this all VICAM columns. This is our traditional AflaTest narrow column developed over 30 some years ago. And we have AflaTest WB, and then we have AflaTest WB SR. Now come SR plus column. Those columns has the same antibody. This one has a different, completely different antibody. And the capacity you can see 300, 400, 500, now it's solvent. And organic solvent tolerance. So when we do QC, we use, corn extract, but the corn extract is 16% methanol for those three type of columns. We QC in those. But for this, it's 25% acetonitrile. We have to make sure this can tolerate at least 25% acetonitrile and has to recover 590 grams of aflatoxins. And advantage of each one is different. So this one is the most economic. It's get test done and relatively cheap. And this one you all know, this is a whiteboard column, so can flow by gravity. This also can flow by gravity. Because the capacity is higher, so relative recovery is higher compared to these two. This one I just talk about over and over. Difficult samples, high performance, and also can capture STC. Currently, all those columns for our QC standard, for our QC criteria, all aflatoxin during the QC has to pass B1, B2, G1, G2, all has to pass 90%. But this doesn't mean for actual sample, for your spiked sample will cover recovery 90%. Because different matrices, is different. And all those columns will bound B1, B2, G1, G2, and N1 and 2. And all our columns, all VICAM columns, like the same thing. It's all room temperature storage for the AflaTest columns. All have shelf life 18 months, even with this new antibody, same.